Alright guys, welcome back to this trap card tier list. We will talk about the best and worst traps in Yu-Gi-Oh! In Yu-Gi-Oh! History. As you can see right here, we have a lot of traps here. Obviously, I have not all the traps that are available in the game, but I have some of them which have been played over the years. More newer ones, some forbidden ones, and then also some older ones, for example, the Bottomless or the Tarantial Tribute. And we have the categories broken, best of the best, situational, and then plain bad. And we will start with a very new card that not all of you might know, and I also have for some their texts on the side because I'm also not super familiar. So we have Simu Archi. If you don't know what the card does, it's kind of like a dimensional barrier. It says this turn neither player can special summon monsters with the same card types: Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, XYZ, or Link they already control. So if your opponent controls a Link monster, you activate this, then they can't summon any more Link monsters. If you do not control two or more of the same card types, Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, XYZ, or Link, all Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, XYZ, and Link monsters you currently control gain 500 attack. So this is, in comparison to Dimensional Barrier, a newer card because this also includes Link monsters, which Dimensional Barrier does not, which is why that has been a tech card in a lot of side decks in the TCG over the last few months, basically, because this can also hit Link monsters. But I think I just wanted to place this here in situational, but this pretty much perfectly describes this card. This card is very situational. It's obviously worse than Dimensional Barrier because this does not negate the effect of the monsters on the field. So for example, the D barrier also negates every XYZ or Fusion or Synchro monster, whereas Simu Archi only basically says you cannot summon them anymore, and you will have to allow your opponent to at least summon one, because otherwise this restriction doesn't apply. Can be nice, might be good in Master Duel in some formats where there are very Link heavy decks, maybe Malice question mark, but we will see. Then we have the next card, which I also need to read, one of the Solemn cards, Solemn Warning. When a monster would be summoned, or when a spell, trap card, or monster effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster, so kind of like Dominus Impulse, honestly, but without the summoning part, you pay 2000 life points, negate that summon or activation if you do destroy it. So out of the Solemn traps, this is definitely one of the worst ones. I wouldn't even call this situational. Would I call this situational? I mean, the situation in which you wanted to use this, you can also use Dominus Impulse, but then again, I guess Dominus Impulse cannot be played by every deck, so we might put this into situational, even though I think it's worse than, for example, Simu Archi. And then we have a card here, a Pointer of the Red Lotus. Not quite sure whether you know the card because it is forbidden, and for a good reason, honestly. This is a crazy card in my opinion, a broken trap card. It's good that it is forbidden. It's one of two trap cards in here that have basically an effect that I think is totally unfair. So for all of you not knowing what this Pointer of the Red Lotus does, it's a trap card that you can activate, I think, on your opponent's standby phase. Then you need to, I think, pay 2000 life points, and then you can look at your opponent's entire hand, choose one card of this hand, and I think banish it until the end phase or something like this. It's not that important because the most important part is that you can see your entire opponent's hand and you remove one of these hand cards, which obviously, if you go first and you activate a Pointer of the Red Lotus, then you can see your entire opponent's hand, you know where to use your interruptions, and you can also remove, for example, their starter, or maybe a triple tactics talents, maybe a Dark Ruler no more, whatever, and they can't really react because you will do this in draw or standby phase. It's a super crazy card, and it's very good that it is forbidden because it's just unfair, it's broken, and it should be forbidden, which it is. Then we have Compulsory Evacuation Device, a very old card. Honestly, we saw some play, or this card saw some play, for example, in the Kashtira format, where we just used this to basically send Kashtira a Rice Heart back to the extra deck. So in the case that there is a very strong single boss monster deck that is good in the meta, the Compulsory Evacuation Device can actually be kind of nice. But once again, this is situational, a very situational card that obviously needs this situation. Otherwise, if you just, I don't know, send a random monster back to the hand, oftentimes they can be resummoned, and it's not impactful enough to just waste this card, because what you have to understand about Compulsory is that it is a -1 because you will use this card in order to return a card, which means you lose a card and your opponent does not. So next we have the virus, or this is basically represents all the viruses. In this case, it's the Eradicator virus, where you need to tribute, I think, a dark monster with 2000 or more attack to destroy all either spells or traps. But we also have this for destroy all monsters with 1/5 defense or attack above and below, basically. So there are a lot of different viruses for different situations, and obviously this is a very situational card, but a very good one in my opinion. Then again, once again, we need to basically use this going first, otherwise this might be a brick going second, which makes it worse. Then we have Dimensional Barrier, which I definitely want to put in best of the best. This will probably land at the bottom of the category if you don't know what this does. It basically says you can declare fusion, synchro, or XYZ, and this turn all effects of these monsters or this monster type is negated and you can't summon them. I think this is better than a Simu Archi because of the negation effect and because of the fact that you can't summon them at any point. For Simu Archi, you will have to let your opponent summon one of these types first in order to react. Then again, you can hit link monsters with this, which is better, but Dimensional Barrier is a really good card that has seen use in a lot of formats, for example in the tier element formats. We have Gravedigger's Trap Hole, or I think it's called Gravedigger's Trap Hole, which is one of the Gravediggers card, which is actually kind of nice, but very situational. If your opponent activates a card in the grave or in the hand, you can negate and destroy that card, and they will be burned for 2000 life points. So honestly, I think this is a better card than some of these other cards here, because it can be used against a lot of things. If you go first, you can place this, and then obviously you can, for example, negate a hand trap. You can negate a Nibiru. Obviously on the second turn, then you can negate, I don't know, Fiendsmith in the graveyard. So obviously this is a situational one, but one of the better cards in my opinion. Then we have Evenly Matched, which in my opinion is one of the best trap cards. Evenly Matched, obviously you can activate this during the battle phase if you control no cards, and then your opponent needs to face down, banish so many cards that you control the same number of cards, which in this case is normally 1 because Evenly Matched is still on the field. This can break an entire board on its own, and there were a lot of formats where this is just a great card. This obviously depends a bit. If there are a lot of Omni Negates on the board of your opponent at end phase, then it's a bit problematic. But the fact that you can use this on your turn, it's a trap card, but you can still use it in the battle phase if you control no cards, makes it one of the best trap cards available. Then we have one of the most broken cards in the entire game, which is why it went to 2. Hopefully it gets forbidden soon because it's way too strong. No, of course not. It's Solemn Judgment, which is one of the best cards. It's a very flexible card that you can use. Paying half of your life points is okay. You can never really die from this card. This can put you in strange situations, but if you go first, have this card in your deck, then it's super effective. You can negate spells, traps, you can negate a monster summon, and obviously it's a counter trap, which means your opponent can't really react to it. The fact that this is a counter trap makes it way better, as counter traps are very broken in their mechanic basically. So I would definitely put Solemn Judgment over Dimensional Barrier. We are so lucky that it is finally at 2. Then we have Infinite Permanence, which I don't know. Can I call this a broken card? I think it's kind of a broken card. Infinite Permanence is one of my favorite staple cards because it's so good going first, it's so good going second. It basically negates one of the biggest weaknesses of trap cards, which is, if you're going second, what are you going to do with this trap card? This card alone can just, basically negate an entire disruption from your opponent. So for example, you can target a Baron, you can target a Caesar, you can target, I don't know, whatever, you can target every boss monster. Otherwise, maybe it's not targetable, then you obviously can't. You can target Kashira or Ricehard in the past, basically. This is such a strong card. You can either use it on your opponent's first turn, interrupting a starter, for example, or you could just save this card and then use it to negate a disruption and play into the opponent's board, which makes it so much better than Effect Veiler. This also does not activate anything like Triple Tactic Talents or Thrust. I think Imperm, and then you have the column, the imperm column, which in Master Duel it's not that effective because the imperm column is basically shown, but in the TCG it is. Crazy card, just amazing. We have a Terror of the Underroots or Overroots, which says that we can target a card on the field and one in the graveyard, and then we move the card from the field to the graveyard and the card from the graveyard face down to the field, which can be a spell trap but also a monster. I think this is a situational card, can be good from time to time, but not as good as the other ones. Then we have Trap Trick, which also is very situational. If you have 2 or more of the same trap in your deck, you can banish one and then set the other one, and you can also activate it this turn, which is actually kind of nice. Yeah, so Trap Trick, we have seen this in obviously Trap Tricks, but also in Labyrinth, a super situational card, but can be extremely good. We have Ice Dragon Prison, which basically says that you can target one monster on the field and then you summon from the graveyard a monster with the same type, so for example a dragon, and then you can summon the monster to your field and then you can banish them both, I think face down. I think you just banish them both, which is obviously a super situational card, but can be good sometimes. We've seen this in trap decks. And then we have this card, which I'm not quite sure how the name is honestly, but what it does, and we have seen this recently being played against, for example, Blue Eyes, is that it's a continuous trap card that you can activate once per turn by paying 1000 life points, and then you can destroy another spell trap on the field. It's not bad, it's situational, but because we have to put something in the plain bad category, let's start with this card. I don't really like it, even though it saw some play against Blue Eyes, obviously not the biggest fan. Then we have Solemn Strike, which says when a monster is summoned or a monster effect is activated, pay 5 life points and then negate and destroy it. I think this is a bit worse than Judgment because of the paying 5, because sometimes then you can just activate this card because you can always pay half your life points, but you can't always pay 5. And I think the fact that you can't negate spells and traps, but monster effects as a basically change or exchange in comparison to Solemn Judgment is just a bit worse, but this is still an amazing card. Then for some older cards here we have Mirror Force, which I would not call plain bad, honestly. I think, what would I call it? I guess we have to keep it in the plain bad category. At the moment it's just not that great because I rarely ever, okay, no, let's put it in situational, honestly. I think it makes sense in situational because this can definitely surprise your opponent. Obviously, the problem with Mirror Force is if your opponent clears every face down card before attacking you for the finish, basically, or if your opponent establishes an Omni Negate and then attacks you. But this can definitely surprise the opponent. But sometimes you also have the situation, let's say you have an SP Little Knight on the field, and then your opponent just summons one monster with, I don't know, 1/7 attack, maybe an Ether Barrel boosted by Lordly Load, and then goes to the battle phase to just destroy SP Little Knight, and then you have a Mirror Force, and then you just use it for this purpose, so it's not that great. Okay, honestly, now thinking about it, it's honestly plain bad. There are situations in which this can be good, but this is because nobody is really expecting Mirror Force to be on the field. I think if we would all start to run Mirror Force again, it would become even worse. Let's compare this with another older card that we can see right here, Tarantial Tribute, which says if there is a monster normal or special summoned, you can activate this, destroy all monsters on the field. I think this is a way, way better card than Mirror Force because you can just activate this in any phase, right? This needs your opponent to attack you. I mean, you will also lose your monsters with the Tarantial Tribute, but I think Tribute also a card that nobody expects, but removing body from the field in main phase 1 can be very, very crucial. For example, against Ryzel in the future, if you just can remove their rank 4 bodies from the field, this can be very impactful. So even though Tarantial Tribute, in my opinion, is a situational card, I think this is honestly quite a good card still, even though we never really see it. We can quickly compare this with another card that kind of does the same, which is a Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon. It kind of does the same because you can activate it every time, which just makes it better than Tarantial Tribute, and then you flip down every monster and linked monsters will be removed from the field. This kind of achieves the same thing as Tarantial Tribute. The upside is that you can keep your monsters, they will be flipped face down, obviously then you can't negate anymore with them, and the upside, so to say, is that your opponent also keeps its monsters or his monsters. This obviously is better when your opponent already summoned monsters on the turn, because sometimes I made the mistake of just flipping down my opponent's field and then afterwards realizing that he can change the battle position again. So you can change the battle position once manually each turn. So for example, if your opponent has already summoned all of his monsters last turn, and then you flip down the monsters with the Karma Cannon, then you can flip them up again because they have not changed their battle position once this turn. But if they are being summoned this turn by normal or special summon, and then you Karma Cannon then you can't flip them back up. And yeah, Karma Cannon super strong. Flipping down monsters is so impactful because then they can't be used for Link Summon, they can't be used for an XYZ Summon, can't be used for a Synchro Summon, can only be used for a Fusion Summon, because if you don't know this, Fusion Summon can also happen with face down monsters. But this is a super disruptive card, as we have seen often in Labyrinth, and I think in theory this is one of the best cards that also other decks can play, not only Labyrinth. We have Ring of Destruction, an old card here which can destroy one card and then burn for the attack points. I think it's okay. I think there's also targets, which makes it worse. The fact that this burns for the attack points is not super relevant. So honestly, I think this is just a plain bad card. The impact is just too low. You want to destroy all the cards with, for example, a Mirror Force or Tarantial Tribute, and the burn doesn't really matter. Same goes for Sakuru Armor, which is a card I played in the past. This is allowed in Edison format and isn't even played there because it's so bad. It targets one monster that attacks and then destroys. So this is a trap card that unfortunately in modern times cannot really see play anymore. We have Bottomless Grapple, which is also an older card, which I think is way better, because this you can use in main phase 1 when your opponent, I think, special summons a monster with 1/5 or more, which is a bad restriction, honestly. Then you can banish that monster, but it can still activate the effect, which once again makes it worse. It's better than Sakuru Armor, and is it better than the Ring of Destruction? It is better than Ring of Destruction in my opinion, but still a card that only in Trap Tricks saw some play and can definitely sometimes be nice, for example, against Gishtira monster maybe. Especially nice against monsters which have an ignition effect that you need to activate, but for most of the monsters which trigger on normal or special summon, this is obviously not that great. And then we have the Black Goat Larves, and I quickly need to read Black Goat Larves. Declare one monster card name this turn. Neither player can special summon monsters with that original name except from the graveyard. And then you can banish this card from the graveyard, which is where you can basically see that it is a newer card, because all of the newer trap cards have this second banish from the graveyard effect. You can banish this card from the graveyard, then declare one monster card name this turn. Neither player can activate the effects of monsters on the field with that original name. So if you set this card, your opponent cannot special summon the monster name, but only from the graveyard. And if this card is in the graveyard and you banish it, your opponent cannot activate the effect of the monster declared name on the field. So a trap card that you can use twice, which honestly I think is a really cool trap card. One of the best situational trap cards that we have right here. You can call every name, but this can also be a downside, because if you don't understand, I mean, in Master Duel it's not that bad because you can just look the name up, but in the TCG, if you don't know the name of the card, what are you going to do then? But this is very nice. You can maybe stop your opponent's play 2 times in a row, which is very impactful. Then again, this is obviously better in a trap deck. Now to the second card on this list, which is definitely one of these 2 cards here, Pointer of the Red Lotus and Trap Dust Shoot. You might not know this card because this card is also forbidden. I think it's worse than a Pointer of the Red Lotus. So it says you can activate this when your opponent has 4 or more hand cards, and then you can choose one monster in your opponent's hand and I think shuffle it back into the deck or remove it until the end phase. I think it's shuffled back into the deck, which kind of makes it better than a Pointer, because a Pointer you will get the card back, but this is the same idea, right? You make your first turn and then you place Trap Dust Shoot or Pointer of the Red Lotus, and then you see your opponent's entire hand, which is the insane part, and then you can also remove a card. But the reason why I think this is a bit worse than a Pointer of the Red Lotus is because you can only remove a monster card, and obviously most of the board breakers, if there are board breakers in your opponent's hand, are spells and traps. So I think that a Pointer is a better card, but both of them are broken as hell, and it's super good that they are forbidden, because seeing the opponent's hand, it's just very unfair. This is kind of like building your board up and then dropping a Mixie on your opponent. This is just too much, plain unfair, and I like that they are forbidden, but they are super strong. Then we have the Dominus Grabs, Dominus Impulse, and the Dominus Purge. A few of the best cards to come to the game, honestly. I think that Impulse is in general a bit better than Purge. Let's just ignore the fact that both of them have different decks that they can go into, and just basically, or is it better, honestly? So this negates a card that searches and destroys it if there's another trap in graveyard, and this negates and destroys, or only negates sometimes, a card that special summons. Okay, honestly, I think that Purge might be the one that is a bit better. So this is basically an Ash Blossom. I think the Impulse is a bit more specific in comparison to the Purge, but you could definitely make an argument for them being very close in power level, and I think that they definitely have to be at the top of the best category. You can activate them from the hand if your opponent controls a card, which means they, once again, like the Infinite Permanence, basically resolve one of Trap's biggest problems, mainly the fact that you can't activate them on your opponent's first turn, but you can activate Imperm, you can activate Impulse, and you can activate Purge, which makes these three cards basically the best Trap cards that we have available in the game right now, in my opinion. The next card is Simultaneous Evacuation Cannon, and I do have to read this card. Obviously, it's a very situational one, but a very strong if you can play it correctly. It says, banish one fusion monster and two XYZ monsters with the same rank from your extra deck whose combined level and ranks equal the total number of cards in both players' hand and on the field. And if you do this, then you can apply this effect. Return two of your banished monsters to the extra deck, one XYZ and one fusion, which you can because you have banished them before, whose combined level and rank equal the level of or rank of one face-up monster your opponent controls, then banish all cards they control. I can quickly move this over so you can also see the card. This is a very insane card. You can banish the entire field of your opponent, but this has to math up basically, which also means you need some specific monsters in your extra deck. This is why this was being played in Labyrinth, because Labyrinth has space to play these specific extra deck monsters. A very strong card if you can use it. This obviously will basically end the entire game if you can resolve it. But yeah, very specific, and in the TCG it's hard to activate because this has to be correct. In the Master Duel, obviously it will show you when you can activate this card, which is a bit of a cheat code when it comes to the Simultaneous Evacuation Cannon or cannons, but this is a very, very strong trap card. Then we have a red Reboot, which says when your opponent activates a trap card, negate the activation, and if you do, set that card face down. Then they can set one other trap directly from the deck for the rest of this turn. After this card resolves, your opponent cannot activate trap cards. You can activate this card from your hand by paying half your life points. I think this is one of the best trap cards once again. It's a bit more specific than the Dominus cards, which is why I think it's a bit worse. But obviously, once again, it's one of the best trap cards because you can activate this from your hand by paying half your life points, which means, once again, this basically circumvents the big downside of trap cards, namely the fact that they can't be activated on the first turn. This is at 2 at the moment, a bit more of a specific card. If, for example, this could also negate spell cards, this would be insane. So I think it's not as good as the Dominus cards, but still very, very strong. And this is what all of the best trap cards do, basically, also evenly matched. They can be activated on your turn, basically, minus these here, which are also broken, but they are forbidden. Then we have Transaction Rollback, which says that if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to copy a trap card in your graveyard, basically, and apply the effect. And on the field, you can activate it to basically copy a trap card out of your opponent's graveyard and then activate its effect. I think this is a super situational card, but can obviously be great, as we have seen this in Labyrinth in trap decks. But otherwise, it's a bit too specific to be used in any real deck, honestly, which I think places it on the bottom of this situational tier. And then we have a card that you might see in the future, Mischief of the Gnomes. You might not know what this card does, but let me explain. You can activate this, and then all levels of your opponent's monsters also in the hand will be reduced by 1. And then you can also banish this card from the graveyard to do it once again, basically. So you can do it twice. Once by activation and then once by banishing it from the graveyard. And why this is nice is because this is very good against Ryziel. Because Ryziel monsters are level 4 monsters and they need to be level 4 in order to go into rank 4. So you can activate Mischief of the Gnomes to make them level 3, basically. And then you can do it once again, which means you can definitely stop your Ryziel opponent in its tracks 2 times, which should be enough to basically win the game from there. Obviously a super situational card, but in situations or against XYZ decks, as we now see in Ryziel or will see in Ryziel in the future, this is obviously a very, very good card. And this is it, my tier list for some of the most prominent trap cards. I'm very interested in your opinion. What do you think of my tier list? Also, what traps do you think I missed, which are very important? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for being here, and we will see each other in the next one.